Let's move into John chapter 2, lesson 7, verses 1 through 5 say, On the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, They've run out of wine. They have no more wine. Jesus said to her, Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, Whatever he says to you, do it. Well, first of all, that's good advice for everybody, not just the servants at the wedding. Whatever Jesus says to us through his word, we really should do it. So it says that they ran out of wine. Wine was a rabbinical symbol of joy. Uh, Therefore, to run out of wine almost would have been equivalent to admitting that neither the guest nor the bride and the groom were really happy. It was a social faux pas back in these days. Uh, this was just uh, not something that would have been socially acceptable to run out of wine at a wedding. Weddings lasted for days and were a huge event, and those who orchestrated the wedding had guidelines that they followed if they wanted to be socially acceptable. So, anyway, the question might be asked, why did Mary ask Jesus to do this in the first place? Well, there are a lot of different scholarly answers, but for me, I think there's no doubt that Mary was anticipating a day when she would be vindicated. Vindicated from what, you might ask? Well, the people of her day looked at her as a woman who had had a child out of wedlock, which was a huge issue and a problem and caused her untold uh, stress and strain, and uh, she was looked at differently than the other women, almost like a prostitute. And yet she knew that Jesus was not just uh, her son, but he was the Son of God. And she understood the ability and power that he had as God to make things right at some point. So Jesus says to her, Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? This sounds disrespectful, but Jesus refers to his mother with a term of respect, woman. He does not call her mother, however, um, because I think he wanted to emphasize that he and she had a different relationship than a normal mother and son. Uh, Obviously, because he was God, he was more than just a son who needed to do what his mother asked him to do. Mary submitted to Jesus' way of doing things, obviously. He was at an age where she was not really raising him anymore. She was following uh, his footsteps. She was seeking to be obedient to him as her God, her Lord, not her son any longer. And so she submitted, and because she knew that he was more than a son, she was willing to patiently wait for him to do the right thing. And it almost seems to me that she expected him to do the right thing always because of who he was. And so verses 6 through 12 say, Now There were set there 6 water pots of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some out now, and take it to the master of the feast." And they took it. And when the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom, and he said to him, "Every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior wine. You have kept the good wine until now." This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum, he, his mother, and his brothers, and his disciples, and they did not stay there many days. So there were 6 water pots of stone here, and Jesus began this miracle by using what he had on hand. He didn't do a showy miracle, although being God, he could have done anything he wanted to. According to the manner of purification of the Jews is a phrase that talks about the fact that these water pots are connected with the law that was in effect at this time, the law God had given the Israelites, and they were used for what is called ceremonial purification. As people came in the house, they ceremonially purified themselves with the water. He told the servants to draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. For these servants, this took a certain degree of faith, because imagine how angry the master of the feast would be if they brought him 6 containers of water to taste. Yet in faith, they obeyed Jesus' word as Mary had asked them to do. Lots of people have argued that Jesus would never make alcoholic beverages, but good wine is good wine, not good grape juice. Didn't call it grape juice, wasn't grape juice. It's true that wine in that day, as commonly served, had a low alcoholic content, more so than modern wine, but it was still wine. Jesus doesn't tell us not to drink, but he tells us to be in control of our bodies and not to overdo anything, uh, not to be drunk with wine, which is excessive. It talks about in another verse. Well, how did Jesus actually do miracles? He did them in many different ways. Here, Jesus did not say a word or blink an eye or flash a wand in the air. He merely exercised his will, and the miracle was done. Not real flashy, was just the way that he wanted it to be. And it says there, his disciples believed in him. Of course, they already believed in him, they were following him. But now that their belief was deepened and re expressed in a different way. We'll stop here for now, and next will be lesson 8.